In March of 1997, something happened over Arizona that still divides people into two camps. One camp says it was simple, a misunderstanding, a routine military exercise, nothing more. The other camp says it was not simple at all. They say it was massive, silent, and seen by too many people to ignore. This is the story of the Phoenix Lights, and it is not one event. It is two events that occurred on the same night, two sets of sightings, two different timelines, and one lasting mystery created by the space between them. It began in the evening hours of March 13th, 1997. Across Arizona, reports started coming in about strange lights in the sky. People described a formation moving steadily across the state. Some said the lights were arranged in a V shape. Others said they were in a straight line. Many witnesses described the lights as slow, silent, and unusually steady. They did not blink like typical aircraft lights. They did not streak like meteors. They did not behave like fireworks. They moved with purpose. The reports were not isolated. They came from multiple towns spread across a wide area. Witnesses described the formation passing over places like Prescott and other communities north of Phoenix, then continuing southward. Some people reported seeing 5 to 7 lights. Some reported more. Some described them as separate lights. Others insisted they were attached to a single large object and that the lights were part of one structure. That disagreement matters because it is the heart of the case. If the lights were separate aircraft, that points in one direction. If they were attached to one large object, that points in another. And here's the problem. In the dark, at night, with no distance markers, the human brain can struggle. Separate lights can appear connected. A large object can appear like separate points. So we need to focus on what many witnesses agreed on. They agreed the lights moved steadily. They agreed the formation was large. And they agreed it was unusually quiet. Some witnesses even described the lights passing directly overhead, blocking out stars behind them, as if something solid was between them and the sky. Others described the sense of scale, not the scale of a plane, something bigger. Now, the story might have ended there, as another wave of unexplained lights. But later that same night, a second event occurred. And this second event is what most people remember when they hear the phrase Phoenix Lights. Hours after the first wave of sightings, residents in and around Phoenix looked up and saw a line of lights appearing in the sky. These lights were bright. They seemed to hover. They appeared one after another, forming a long arc across the night. Then, one by one, they went out. The pattern was dramatic. It looked staged. It looked unreal, and it was widely filmed on home cameras. This is where the case became famous, because once you have video, the story spreads faster than memory. But video does not always simplify. Sometimes it does the opposite. Because video removes context, it compresses the sky into a flat screen, and it turns distance into guesswork. Still, those second-wave lights were undeniably seen by many people, and they became the most iconic image of the case. Now, here's where the controversy becomes sharp. There's an official explanation for the second event. The explanation is that the lights were military flares. Specifically, illumination flares dropped during a training exercise at a military range. If you have never seen such flares, here is what matters. They can be extremely bright. They can appear to hang in the air. And from a distance, they can look like stationary lights in formation. As they burn out, they disappear one by one. That matches a lot of what people saw in the second event. So why does the case remain debated? Because many witnesses insist the first event was different. And because some witnesses insist the second event, too, did not behave like flares. So the Phoenix Lights story becomes a question of separation. What did people see earlier in the evening? And what did people see later at night? If the later lights were flares, What explains the earlier formation moving across the state? And if the earlier formation was aircraft, why did so many people describe the same unusual features? This is why the Phoenix Lights are so powerful as a case. They're not a single claim. They're a layered situation. A moving formation reported across multiple towns. And later, a dramatic line of lights filmed above Phoenix. Two events, one night, and a public that often blends them into one. Now, let's talk about what makes the first event difficult. The first event involves movement across a large geographic area. Multiple independent witnesses reported a formation traveling a long distance. That kind of widespread reporting is harder to dismiss as a single misidentification. Could it still be aircraft? Yes. A formation of planes can create the impression of something large. But there are questions. Why did so many witnesses describe silence? Aircraft are loud, especially when they pass overhead. However, sound at night can be deceptive. Wind direction, altitude, and distance can reduce noise. A formation could appear closer than it is, especially if the lights are bright. Then there is the V shape. A V shape is not impossible for aircraft, but it is unusual for commercial traffic. It would suggest a deliberate formation, which brings us back to the possibility of a military operation. But if it was a military operation, why was the public not informed? The answer might be simple. The military does not announce every flight pattern, but a very large formation visible across the state would likely produce more official documentation. And that is where the case becomes frustrating. The public does not have a complete official timeline that clearly separates everything and closes the story. Instead, the public has partial statements, competing interpretations, and a lot of memory. Now, let's talk about the second event again, because this is where the official explanation becomes strongest. The lights that appear, hover, and then go out one by one match the behavior of flares very well. And there's a known training range outside Phoenix where such flares can be used. From Phoenix, flares over that range could appear to hover. And as they descend slowly, their apparent position relative to the horizon can seem almost fixed. Then they burn out, one by one. On video, that is exactly how it can look. So a disciplined approach does not ignore this. A disciplined approach accepts that at least part of the Phoenix Light story can be explained. And that is important, because the best mysteries are rarely all or nothing. Often, the truth is mixed. One part mundane, one part uncertain. Now, why do many people still reject the flare explanation? Because of emotion, not in a weak sense, in a human sense. People remember how it felt. They remember the silence. They remember the scale. They remember the way neighbors came outside and pointed upward. And those memories become a kind of evidence in the mind, even when the video seems explainable. But memory has limits. Memory is not a measuring device. So we have to ask, what is the honest conclusion? The honest conclusion is that the Phoenix Lights likely contain at least two different phenomena. The later event, filmed as a line of hovering lights, aligns strongly with the flare explanation. The earlier event, described as a moving formation traveling across Arizona, remains harder to fully close with public information. It could still be aircraft. It could be a formation viewed at distance with unusual atmospheric conditions. It could be misinterpretation layered across many witnesses. But it remains disputed. And that dispute is why the Phoenix Lights are still one of the most famous cases in modern UAP history. Because it shows how quickly a night of confusion becomes a permanent cultural event. Now, there is one more reason this case matters. Public trust. When people saw the lights, many expected officials to explain clearly what happened. Instead, many felt the response was delayed, unclear, or dismissive. And when people feel dismissed, they stop trusting explanations, even good explanations. That is a key lesson in modern UAP culture. If you want the public to accept a mundane cause, you must communicate clearly and quickly. Otherwise, the mystery grows. Now, if you step back, the Phoenix Lights offer a sober message. The sky can produce events that look extraordinary. Sometimes those events are extraordinary. Often they're not. But the difference matters, and separating them requires data. Radar logs, flight records, clear timelines. Without that, the story becomes a tug of war between belief and skepticism. And the Phoenix Lights sit right in the middle of that war. So where do we leave it? We leave it with a careful summary. On March 13th, 1997, many people across Arizona reported a large formation of lights moving across the state. Later that night, many people in Phoenix saw and filmed a line of lights that appeared to hover and then disappear one by one. The second event has a strong, plausible official explanation involving military flares. The first event remains debated, partly because it relies heavily on eyewitness perception across large distances, and partly because the public does not have a single complete set of records that closes it. And that is why the Phoenix Lights remain one of the most enduring UAP stories. Not because it proves one shocking answer, but because it shows how the modern mystery is built. Two events, one night, one state watching the sky, and decades later, people still argue about what they saw. Because once a night like that enters memory, it stops being just a report. It becomes a question that sounds simple but isn't. When thousands of people look up and see lights they cannot explain, what exactly are they seeing? And how many times has the sky played this trick before?